Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS. Today, our distinguished guest is Shri T.K.A. Nair, or T.K.A. Nair as he is now known. One of the most experienced, most respected, most loved bureaucrat in India. He has had a long innings in the IAS, in Punjab, in other parts of India, even in Kerala, and finally, he retired from the Prime Minister's office as Special Advisor with the rank of Minister of State. Before that, he was also Principal Secretary to Prime Minister. I had known him from the days when we were together in a university college. He was, of course, senior, but I had a glimpse of him on occasions with his other friends. And we always thought of him as a man with many parts and many roles, and everybody knew that he would go high wherever he went. So that was the impression I had of him, and he fulfilled that promise during his 50 years in the administrative service. So thank you very much for joining us on this freewheeling discussion on the state of the nation. The state of the nation, none of us is happy with it. But where do you identify those issues? And what is your advice at this time as a wise, experienced bureaucrat as well as a patriotic Indian?
Thank you, Shri, for having me on your show, and also for the very flatteringly kind words that you spoke about me. Well, yes, as it happened, I spent donkey's years in the civil service, and even after a formal retirement, I did spend more than 10-15 years in the service of the country, let me put it that way, if it is not, saying too much. Well, I also have had that very, very rare privilege of working with three of our prime ministers. Let me say that none of these things was planned. And to be honest with you, I never worked for anything in particular. I didn't have the ghost of an idea that one day I would land up in the PMO as the principal secretary. Even when I saw the Mr. Gujarat and before that Mr. Vajpayee as secretary in their offices, even at that time I didn't imagine that one day I would become, the man, in the corner room or on the south block, as it were. So it's by chance. It's very, very gracious of you to ascribe it to my capabilities or qualities, which I think hundreds of our friends, colleagues in the civil service do possess. So I have no illusions about that, really.
No, but quite obviously, if three prime ministers could keep you, that itself shows how much they respected you and considered you as a good advisor. That, of course, I don't think you can dispute. But let me first ask you how you are. How did the lockdown help you, or how did it hurt you? And how is your family? How are things? We live very close by, but we don't see each other. But everything is well, and you are ready for the post-COVID world.
Well, nothing. Let me put it this way: that I don't feel unhappy or I don't regret being in Thiruvananthapuram. I am quite happy, but frankly speaking, the COVID has given one the feeling that it's better to say goodbye. Those who are above 65, they are not only a burden on society, as I see it, because we, to my mind, are not contributing very much to the productive part of India. And we can say that, our experience counts and this and that. We can flatter ourselves, and we can also busy ourselves with many things, which I also try once in a while. But COVID particularly has given me the feeling that, look, after 65, you are really not wanted. I mean, this is a very pessimistic kind of a thought in the morning for your viewers. But that's my gut feeling these days is that, look, there are certain things from your own personal point of view you would like to continue doing till you kick the bucket, as it were. One is, to go to a library when you feel like. The other is that you meet some friends. Well, in Thiruvananthapuram, people are not used to meeting each other, you know that.
Yeah.
But still, once in a while, one would feel like going across to somebody and talk. I've got two, one senior colleague and one my own batchmate in my neighborhood, in my walking distance.
Mm-hmm.
But even we do not meet frequently any longer. Because we are all on our guard. Gates are closed, dogs are set out.
This is even pre-lockdown was it? Or only during lockdown?
Pre-lockdown, it wasn't this much. It is after this lockdown time.
Right.
It is the lockdown which made it pointedly clear that after 65, don't go here. A temple.
Mm.
I used to go to temples.
Now you can't go. In fact, I wrote an extensive piece on this after 65. And in fact, you started growing old after the lockdown because of all this awareness. And everybody saying 65. 65 I thought was young. I don't think up to age of 65 I was, senile or anything. Even today I don't think so, but maybe I am. But it does happen after 70, maybe you tend to forget things and so on. But at least 65 to 70, I never thought it was a time to give up. And as you know, the WHO itself has said that up to 75 is your middle age. So, that was revised.
Middle or after that. But believe me, at the age of 65, I used to work for minimum 10 hours a day.
Yeah, exactly. So it is possible.
Saturdays.
Even today, if suppose you assume a position, I'm sure you will work as hard and as effectively. Because the adrenaline has to. Yeah.
Sense of responsibility.
Exactly. And then once you feel that you are not, effective or you are not needed or wanted, nobody will want you as such. That is the problem. You don't. If you want to go and talk to the present principal secretary and give him some advice, you will be the last one he will want to meet. because when we were in the position, we never thought that our predecessors were going to help us. We gave them a cup of coffee and sent them away rather than listen to this advice. If you remember that, then there will be no problem. But it's always good to do something, maybe a routine job where you go in the morning and come back in the evening. That may be a good thing to do, which I do by running this academy. Totally free, totally honorary. But do that as a part of your daily. So, but what is your overall assessment of the situation? Things are bad in India in many ways. And you will know it when you see it. But this started even before the pandemic. This is the irony of the situation. And things have now become only worse. Of course, so many things can be said about what is happening, the government, various other things. But isn't there a general deterioration in the psyche of the people? Particularly in Kerala, you get that feeling as to whether everybody seems to have lost something or lost the direction. I'm not talking about politics, but generally too much of chaos and too much of crime and too much of personal vendetta. This is not normal, isn't it? And what do you ascribe to it? How is this happening? Or is it the same, but we are seeing too much of news? I mean, this could be one of the two.
That's one way of looking at it, that we have, we hear and we come to know more things than what we used to. And again, let me also put it this way, that when you have a full-time responsibility, when you go to office in the morning, come back maybe evening or late evening, you seldom do have the time, to watch the TV or to read the newspapers. I remember, the maximum that you could do was to have a look at one of the newspapers in the morning before you go to office. And when you come back, totally fagged out at the end of the day, you won't feel like,
looking at it.
newspapers, nothing of the kind. And I do not know whether say during the last 10 years, there has been, 10 or 15 years, there has been a perceptible deterioration in the general standard. I won't make any comment on that because of my lack of knowledge on that. But definitely, I share the thought with you that, one is not feeling very happy, not because of oneself or not because of the politics, but even otherwise, overall, the impression that one gets, basically from the channels and the newspapers and the contemporary books that you read, it's one of, may not be thought of chaos. Generally in society, there is a sense of unease, if I may say so in the absence of a better word. You don't feel very comfortable. Actually, I have reached this stage where by habit, by compulsive habit, I pick up the newspaper and read it. But if you ask me, I don't like reading what comes out. Take the newspaper, take our Malayalam newspapers for instance. The front page, most of it would be what? Crime, violence,
corruption. Yes. Corruption.
But corruption is now become so commonly written about. But that doesn't give you a feeling of revulsion. It's easy. These stories of rape, these stories of that, this. Sometimes I wonder, has Kerala society become so cruel? Absolutely. And again, I also wonder whether Kerala is that bad. If you read the newspapers and listen to the channels in the evening, you sometimes get the impression that the society is so cruel, so heartless, so mindless, and people are indulging only in corruption. There's nothing else that they do. And I do not know who is responsible for it. You can't say the media is responsible. Well, I do not know how to put it in the context of what has now been said or is sought to be attended by the Supreme Court in terms of a kind of generally accepted code or something which the media itself would evolve. I do not know whether that is going to be a solution to the problem or whether that kind of a thing would even happen. But still, it points to a fact that not only in Kerala, in the rest of India also, this free for all has become too much. As an old man, this is my feeling. And I feel quite miserable about it. When you read a story of violence, forget about corruption. That doesn't give you, at least to give me, that feeling of revulsion.
Yes, violence of the most extraordinary kind. It is not just violence, it is absolutely unbelievable. But what do you think of the IAS now? Are you is the administration under great pressure? How is it that they are not standing up to these? Whether that is where is the steel frame which ought to hold this together in spite of all that is happening politically?
Well, Srini, let me tell you honestly that this talk about the steel frame and this and that, that's okay. You have to have a structure of governance in this country. And I do believe even today that the All India services do play an important part in holding the country together, certainly, not to the extent which was envisaged during the time of Sardar Patel. Times were different, the socio-economic situation was different, and the demands on an organized service in a parliamentary democracy, they were also different. Let's understand, I keep on repeating it ad nauseum to whoever is willing to listen to me from the services, that let's have no illusions about it. You are instruments in the hands of the government, of the elected government. You can be described as a subsystem or whatever, as a student of public administration or governance, but you are definitely instruments in the hands of the elected political executive.
But earlier it was more advisory rather than being an instrument. Earlier it was you were an honest advisor to the government, not an instrument of it.
Well, it is now an instrument. I was very recently, I did read several pieces written about the role of Sardar Patel. He is known as the patron saint or the father of the All India Service. I'm sure you would have read about all that thing.
Absolutely.
The correspondence between him and Panditji, and the extent to which he went saying that there's one sentence which he writes, no All India Service, no Union of India. I think that even then, to my mind, it was a very exaggerated notion, but he had his reasons for saying
even on China, he had a different view than Panditji, which turned out to be right.
And now, we talk about, ultimately, it has got to boil down onto, when you talk about governance, definitely, political part of it is the most important. So my thesis is that it is the political leadership that sets the tone. And in a parliamentary democracy, whether you call it a brute majority or whatever it is, for good or bad, once you elect a government, elected by the people, you can fault the electoral machines or whatever. But having accepted all that and having elected a government, I think that government sets the tone for governance.
It should be allowed to govern. It should be allowed to govern.
Well, that's the other issue. That is the other issue that comes, as one who was a part of, as a cog in the big wheel of governance, I definitely would say that once an elected government comes to power, that government should be given the opportunity to govern.
Right.
Of course, it doesn't mean that that government can get away with anything that they do. And, the founding fathers of our constitution gave us such a wonderful structure of checks and balances. The three wings of the government, the legislature, the executive and the judiciary, each playing its own role as defined in the constitution. Now, you and I know, many of our viewers would know that to some extent at least, this has become a kind of a shell. Within that, what happens is something which is not true, not in the true sense of the functioning of the democracy. We read so much about the functioning of these three institutions in government. Earlier, it used to be more about the executive and the legislature. The way in which the members of the legislature, they are elected, criminalization of politics. We read so much about it. We also read so much about, the wrongdoings of the executive, corruption, this, that, and the other. But of late, most unfortunately, most regrettably, we seem to have been under an illusion, even about the judiciary.
Yes. Even judiciary is not beyond beyond the temptations of the others, and that's very sad. In fact, that was the last resort for the for mankind.
So, in this kind of a context or a situation, one tends to become a little, not only concerned. We are all concerned about good governance when things which, according to our scheme of ethics or our scheme of belief, are not according to those, we feel concerned. But today it is much more than that. Why should you and I worry about, a judgment given by the Supreme Court in a given case? But it's not that kind of thing which is happening any longer. It's issues which touch, the daily lives of the people. Srini, the worst I felt ever was the way in which the Honorable Supreme Court did deal with the plight of these hundreds of thousands of migrants. Whatever has happened in many other areas, they do not, they have not given me that kind of, anguish. Particularly when we know that still the word of the Supreme Court is the law of the land, and no authority in India will afford to take it lightly. And in such circumstances, well, I may be wrong in my thinking. I'm not a man well versed in the discipline of the judiciary, but I thought that the judiciary unfortunately could have done far, far better to ameliorate the condition of those hundreds of thousands of poor people who are left to nothing.
Yes, that was very unanticipated, I think. I don't know why so, because nobody probably thought that this was an issue. Even in Kerala, when we were talking about the COVID issue, nobody focused on this particular aspect, which was a major social problem. And in the north, it was even worse. But what do you think, how have we handled the COVID issue? In Kerala, we got a lot of praise initially, but later things got much worse. And today, I think Kerala's situation is probably worse than many other states in India. How do you explain this? Is it only the arrival of the expatriates, or is it something else? But is the system able to cope with it?
Well, let me put it this way that, being a pandemic, to my mind, the extent to which a particular, unit of government in India or the government of India, or any nation for that instance, the extent to which they can, change the course of this pandemic, I am very doubtful about that. It's by the very word pandemic.
Yes, uncontrollable.
Of a global phenomenon. You think that in a country like India, the states can shut themselves off for long periods of time?
No, we have found it was impossible.
We tried all that. The Prime Minister did, before this thing became so serious, so much widespread, he imposed the quarantine part of it.
Lockdown.
The lockdown part of it, not the quarantine, the lockdown part of it. Of course, we have several explanations for the lockdown, how the lockdown period could have been used, what was the thinking behind the lockdown, etc., etc. There's a lot of postmortem going on that. But you think, even if the stated objective of preparing the country for the future outbreak of COVID, even if you accept that was the basis, you think it has happened? I don't think it can happen at all.
No, there was an expectation that somehow this will disappear in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It has no logic. But even now we feel that, maybe this year, forget 2020, we'll be all right.
Well, it may be a very cruel way of putting it, but let's understand this way, based on what has happened so far. What's the population of India? What's the population of Kerala? Don't you think there is a relationship between the total population of a given geographical area, whether you call it
density, and the density.
That's it. So the very logic of that, I believe, I argue with myself, that the very logic of it indicates that you would have to face what? Little more of spreading of COVID in India. Yes, definitely the role of the state government, the role of the government of India is to ensure that the consequences of that spread is minimized to the maximum possible extent. That's what is being done. But again, let's understand the role of the government of India ceases at a point. And then the state government has got to come into play. Similarly, beyond a point, the state government cannot also. It has got to go down. So from the panchayat or from the lowest level of governance to the highest. There are various ways of dealing with it. And a total, in unison they have to work. It's easy to say it. But in actual practical life, does it happen? There's so many, so many problems, so many issues which are foreseen, which are unforeseen. And I don't think it is proper to fault a government, whether it is the government of India or the state government, for what it is now. But yes, when you talk about the plight of the poor people, the migrants, their government could have done something. Government could have taken preventive action. But this is not something like that. Yes, if the Kerala government, in according to their understanding, based on the advice that they get, foresees that there is going to be a further spread of it, and consequently there are more people getting admitted into the hospital, needing ventilators, etc., etc. It is the duty of the government to plan for it now.
Right.
But again, let us understand, beyond a point, in 3 or 4 months, you can't do any proper, you may be able to plan, you can't put into implementation, into actual practice, many of the things that we talk about, particularly after the event. We are all wise. I have seen, with reference to a particular person, and I got a message also, the way in which the Kerala government's health staff is dealing with this problem. It's very commendable. And again, there is a coordinated effort also between the police, the district administration, the health, etc., etc. But let us understand, what is possible in Kerala is not even conceivable in many parts of India. That is India what we have. In terms of health infrastructure, in terms of awareness, we are far ahead of most other parts of India. So if we are having this kind of a problem, you can imagine what would be the plight in other places, and then in totality in India. So I am not, for a moment,
So optimistic.
thinking that there has been
No, that you are not
really
optimistic
no.
about.
Pardon me. My understanding of the situation is that, most regrettably, till a viable vaccine is available in the market, I think we would have to live with this. This is my understanding, and let me hasten to say that at the same time, the state governments, the local governments, and the government at the top, the government of India, they all have their part to play in ensuring that the distress or the calamity, the intensity of it is lessened.
No, the lockdown is impractical, business has to go on, etc. But why do you have to have this business of protests and strikes also to go on? Isn't it possible for political parties to come to a consensus on an agreement that here now we have to fight the COVID and not all this? What do we see outside on the streets every day? There is no logic at all for doing this. Actually, we should have a national government. That is what we should be having.
Well,
where everybody has a stake.
I wish we had, I do not know whether there is any way of even promoting this kind of thoughts.
Yes, but then immediately it will be misunderstood that you are trying to perpetuate somebody or to create somebody, etc., because they don't want their identity to be lost because the next election is coming. I think we should suspend all elections and just carry on with this work, and that is what should be done.
Well, that's why the totality of the country and the totality of the world as we live in, they all, become part of it, unfortunately. You say, looking at what is happening in Kerala, these agitations, they do definitely, let me put it the other way, that they are not promoting the cause of preventing COVID. But can you say that there should be no agitation? Political leadership, I come back to my point. The political leadership in a democracy is the most crucial. And the political leadership alone can think in terms of understanding that these issues which are beyond politics, the issues of and therefore we should not do anything which is against the best of all people. Aren't they also part of the society? They live in it. They know it much more than we do. But there is not even a whisper about the total atmosphere in the country. And unfortunately, India is facing tremendous problems. COVID, on top of it, there is this very unsettled condition on our borders, and then far more affecting the common people, the economy, and the level of unemployment, the level of poverty. All these combined are causing such terrible problems. They are contributing to a situation the like of which we have not seen in the past. It's really unprecedented times.
So one contradiction that you find is the government keeps saying that there is no money. Even the central government says, our government says, but the amount of money they are spending on things which are not urgent. Why do we need to inaugurate so many projects and so many things? And why not focus on the right and immediate needs of the country? I mean, this is something which is very difficult to understand. They are thinking in terms of the elections, therefore there must be so many projects inaugurated and celebrated. Why can't we just do without any of those? And that doesn't seem to go into the minds of any political party, unfortunately. That is really the...
I wish there are some politicians who think on these lines. I mean, look, I am not a student of economics in the conventional sense of the term. Nor am I a finance expert. But the point that you are making about the priorities of government,
Yes.
that to my mind is very skewed. I definitely expected that the government, with this huge majority, vast popularity of the Prime Minister, would do many things which would have alleviated the misery of the people.
It would have been more productive. This kind of money could have been used for so many things which one could do.
And again, I am not against industry or corporates or anything, but you imagine the time when people, economists, political leaders, other leaders from outside this country, they were all talking about putting purchasing power in the hands of the people.
Right.
When you were faced with the problem of, the economic slowdown. And what did we do at that time? I can't forget that. I don't know what was the logic of putting 1.45 lakh crores in the hands of 300 or 400 corporates, in the hope that this will be invested and that investment will result in employment generation. But I wish somebody had a look at the balance sheets of these companies which received this support and what the hell did they do?
No, exactly. All these projects which are meant for COVID relief did not really go into it. That is the unfortunate part of it.
They don't. Again, as we said, there are many areas, constrained as we are financially, there are many areas our priorities could have been different. Certainly, there are many areas where the priority could have been different. And again, let's put it this way, that, if we believe that the future of this country would be bright, that we could make our economy into 5 or 10 trillion or whatever it is, by, at the same time ignore the plight of the majority of Indians, I think it's a chimera. It won't happen. That's my reading. Imagine a situation where the automobile industry or any industry for that matter, if it is to survive, if it is to expand, the products that they make must have a market. And that market means people should have the purchasing power. And without that, without looking at the demand side of it, if you're trying to prop up only the supply side, I think that's taking from the wrong end.
Well, you mentioned the borders, my favorite subject, of course, how to deal with. In fact, yesterday's statement by the defense minister in parliament sounded really pessimistic about the whole thing. Even after this agreement reached between Jaishankar and the Chinese foreign minister, which appeared to be futuristic to a certain extent. But what was said in parliament raised no hope of a solution or a disengagement. I mean, there seems to be some kind of a disconnect somewhere. These conversations with the Chinese, what do they lead to? Every time you agree, disengage, this, that, and the other. And then you go back to the same situation, LAC is not determined, we have to solve the problem, etc., which has been going on since the 50s. So, you must have seen this at close quarters in the Prime Minister's office. We always believed that we could carry on with normal business with China, even when we are struggling with the border situation. This does not seem to have worked very well, I think. Because look at the Pakistanis, they don't talk to us except through arms and ammunition, unless the Kashmir issue is solved. There is a core issue. So they won't even give us, most favored nation or anything like that. Here we have gone out of our way to be friendly to the Chinese. 15 times the Prime Minister met the President, 5 times he went to China. What are they talking about? Where are we? What is our objective? If the Chinese are not going to talk about the border, then you might as well accept that reality. So here, the kind of, there could be so many factors in all this. And is this particular incident now, is it related to Article 370 and the changes we have brought about in Jammu and Kashmir? Do you think so?
I don't think that Article 370 or 35, they are the only issues. To my mind...
Because of their collusion with Pakistan.
To my mind, the Kashmir problem, I still believe that there is a problem, is inextricably linked with Indo-Pakistan relations.
Okay.
And I also believe today, there was a time when I thought that some kind of a rapprochement, some kind of a leaving relationship could be developed between India and Pakistan. But today I am very, very pessimistic. I think that, in such strong words, Pakistan was, the very rationale of Pakistan is hatred of India.
Absolutely.
And so long as Pakistan exists, therefore, this hatred will continue. And we have to, because we cannot choose, we cannot change the
neighbors you cannot choose.
That's as far as Pakistan is concerned.
But
there were times when we appeared that we were inching towards some kind of a... There was a time when Musharraf was in charge of Pakistan. Dr. Manmohan Singh was this side. I still remember many occasions where we all felt very hopeful that what Manmohan Singh used to say, or I think he said it somewhere, that you have breakfast in Amritsar and lunch in Lahore or whatever. But those days, I think those kinds of days of optimism to my mind are over. To my mind, even those days the optimism was misplaced because even though he was basically an army man, look, the rationale of Pakistan Army, the ISI, what is that? It is hatred of India. If the solution to the Indo-Pak problem is found, where do they go? Where do they get their source of strength?
Yeah, they have the advantage of being somewhat considered equal to India because of this problem. There's no equality between us. Everybody wants to balance the two of us rather than do something concrete with India. I have seen it at the UN for years. All their concern is to balance the two, and somehow manage to carry on rather than dealing with the issue or trying to help out. Of course, religion is a major factor and so many others. Mr. Modi himself tried very hard. Initial.
Yes. He went out of his way.
Yeah.
He went out of his way. I must say that whether you criticize or praise Modi ji for that, both in regard to Pakistan and China, you
He
can't
did
say
his
that
best.
he did not do his job. Absolutely.
Right.
It's again a strong word to use. He bent over backwards.
Absolutely. He did that. Even now, he thinks that this can be resolved by some kind of a divine means. I think that probably he has still that hope in him that you can see, because he, like the statement that he made, George, is also being criticized that China has not occupied our territory, etc. He may have consciously said that to create that, image and create that sense of security, etc., etc. But now it's all being seen very differently. So, but what mystifies everybody is why China at this time? If it had nothing to do with 370, nothing to do with Ladakh. I mean, they should be busy with the pandemic themselves, and they seem to have been responsible for it even. But for them to do this, is it an illusion that they can become the leaders of the world? The Americans withdrawing or Americans collapsing? What is your reading on that?
Srini, I am not an about China, but let me say, my impression is that the moves that China is making today, they are far different from those little things which happened in the past. China under Shri is definitely pursuing a larger international entity. They see not as a competitor to India. They see themselves to be dominating the whole world. And the moves that he has been making, particularly that road and bridge initiative, etc., these are manifestations of his large global ambitions. So the way in which he is dealing with India, I have one thought on that. The United States of America is not a neighbor. The United States of America at times have some kind of working relationship with China, but at times the relationship is very antagonistic. Even, of course, Trump is beating about the bush. He says all kinds of things. You have a trade war with America. At the same time, you are also quite clear in your mind that the United States is not coming to the aid of India if, God forbid it, if a conflict, breaks out between India and Pakistan. You know that the Western powers, Britain, USA, etc., they were hyphenating India and Pakistan once upon a time. Yes. Even after there was mounting evidence that Pakistan was harboring terrorists, that Pakistan was really funding the terrorists, and the hideouts of the terrorists identified even after Sama's incident. The Americans, for that matter, any other power coming to India, if really it comes to a conflict between India and Pakistan, I think it's very remote. They would all, try to balance the two to ensure that there is no, at least, nuclear flare out between.
That is what everybody is afraid of. That is the only thing. But the Americans will support you. They will give you arms and ammunition. They will give you advice, maybe. But they are not going to fight our war. That is very clear. But at the moment, China seems to be losing its popularity around the world, even with countries like Germany or other countries which were very friendly with them. Okay, good. Thank you very much for spending some time with me. It has been a great pleasure seeing you, talking to you. Thank you very much.